This is the Incongruous channel. I'm Dr. Andy Yates, and today we're going to be talking about COVID and me. So I'm going to give you some of my experiences about my getting COVID and the experience of that and so on, because it might be useful to you. But I must say, I'm not a licensed medical doctor. I'm retired anyway. And I just want you to know that if something is here gives you some ideas about this or whatever, or indicates that you may have some condition, then consult a medical licensed doctor. You got it, right? So even if I give what sounds like advice about, I don't know, essential oils, we'll get to that. But just consider that it's a layman's perspective, and you probably need to speak to a doctor, medical licensed. Gotcha. Okay. So our experience, she must be a babe and I, started on 2020 when we went shopping, and she had this terrible shooting pain in her fingers, and it was kind of hard to do the shopping because she's trying to pick things up and do different things, right? So on the 21st, she then passed out. And of course I'm worried about it, and I check her out and check her, vital statistics, check her pulse, the temperature, make sure she's breathing okay and everything. And she seemed to be fine. And when she came round, typical nurse, she said, "Oh, I'll be fine. Just leave me this, make a cup of tea," or whatever it was. She wasn't eating for sure. Flat out for 3 days, basically. And I checked on her every 30 minutes and always had the phone by her so she could speed dial me if she needed anything or there was any change in her condition. She just went through a miserable time, coughing, fever, nausea, and a facial rash. So we thought, yeah, that's COVID-19, and likely I'm going to get it too. So at that point, I started taking my temperature, which was normal. We did find a couple of things we think helped. One was using a diffuser with essential oils in it, eucalyptus and lemon. And again, I'm not recommending this, but it worked for us. Okay. We also were making sure we took a nice dose of vitamin D. And if you want to check out the references on that and everything, I suggest you go to YouTube, look up Dr. John Campbell, Campbell, English guy talking about lots of things to do with COVID. Very knowledgeable about COVID, not so much about politics, but you can ignore that part. He doesn't talk much about it, but lots and lots of COVID. And he does a whole show on vitamin D and the references and the medical studies have been carried out. So he's really, top information. About 4 days after the pain in the fingers thing, which was the first signs for her, she started to recover a bit. She was still fatigued, very weak, with a bit of pain. She did suffer from, what do they call it? Neuralgia. So like pain in all the nerves and things like this and so on. And she was taking some over-the-counter analgesics for that. And then about a week later, after the first symptoms, she was still weak, but mainly recovered, because a few days earlier she couldn't get up the stairs by walking up the stairs. If she wanted to go and have a shower or something, she would crawl up the stairs and I would help, But after a week she was getting around, pretty weak and so on. And we were lucky we had some good support from Heather's daughter and friends of ours who were walking the dogs. We got by, as we Brits do, right? Keep calm, carry on. That's what we do, isn't it? Unfortunately, that means sometimes we don't address things that really need taking care of, like politics and so on. But we won't get into that. All right. Now, it was about that time, a week later, that I started to feel a bit ill, and I'm watching my temperature, and it started to climb. So what I'm going to do is go through my symptoms. And it might be fair to ask, but Andy, how did you know you had COVID? So I looked at PHE, NHS, World Health Organization, the CDC in America, Center for Disease Control. I think I went to South Korea because they'd done very well. Looked at France, different places like this. I came up with, and I've combined them together, into a list of 12 symptoms. So I'll go through my experience of those symptoms and you can get an idea. And by the way, I was sick for a month. It was not nice. It was horrible. I'm sure Shia must have been suffered just as much, maybe more, but in a different way. And that's what's interesting about COVID-19 is people often experience it in different ways. But anyway, this is my way. So I had a fever in the end of 38.5, which is for American friends about 101 degrees F. I had chills, I had shivering. There were days I had shivering so bad that even though I'm sat at my laptop just like I am now, I'd have a blanket on and I would be shivering so hard I couldn't work the mouse because I couldn't get the mouse to stay still enough to actually point and then click on something. You get what I mean, right? It was terrible. And then I'd be hot and I'd throw the blankets off and then I'd be cold and I'd put them back on. Terrible. I had a cough. Now, COVID says a dry cough. I had a wet cough. So did Shia Must Be Obeyed. We have wet coughs. Okay, so like I've kind of got now, you can hear it. Sort of wet. I had shortness of breath and I didn't realize until afterwards, till I analyzed it, just how bad that was. Because just like her, I couldn't get upstairs. There's 11 steps from the ground floor to the first floor in this house, or the first to the second, would it be in America. I used to have to stop about stair 5 or 6 and have a rest for a few minutes to catch my breath before I could get up the rest of the stairs. Terrible. Terrible. Very much shortness of breath. And that's been a carryover. Okay, I think my lung capacity has decreased. Even though I didn't go to hospital, didn't get oxygen, didn't go on a respirator, I think it's reduced my lung capacity. I lost the smell. I lost the sense of smell and taste. I lost taste for a month, smell for 2 months, which was really weird because when taste came back, I could tell if something was sweet or salty or bitter, whatever those basic ones you get through your mouth. But without the sense of smell, I couldn't tell what it was I was eating, but I would know if it was sugary or not. You get what I mean, right? I had a lot of fatigue, weakness, couldn't walk the dogs, couldn't get around, muscle loss. I remember standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom and looking at my arms. Now, they're not exactly, I'm not exactly a muscular guy, terribly. I got a muscle there now. But it was all hanging underneath, like a couple of wings. And I'm like, oh, that's disgusting, because I've always tried to be a little bit fit. It's horrible. So I got some 10-pound weights. I do, if you add up all the weight, I do about 3,000 pounds a day, just lifting 10-pound weights and, all this kind of stuff, just to help, and I probably do that 2 or 3 times a week or something like that. Plus, I mentioned exercise while we're on it. Now I'm back to 4 times a week. We go out for a bit of a walk or a hike in the country parks, do about 3 miles when we do that. So I'm getting back. That's very positive, isn't it? Optimistic. So loss of appetite. I just stopped eating for probably about 2 weeks. I lost 20 pounds in weight. 1.5 stone, right? Just didn't want to eat to start with. And I had, we'll come to that, but I had vomiting. We'll come to that. Didn't want to eat. I had body aches, so I had myalgia and neuralgia. So I had the nervy stuff, not as bad as Shia Must Be Obeyed, but I still had some of that. And I had muscle aching. It was as if every knock or bump I've ever had in my life came back to haunt me, right? I mean, I've got arthritis in my fingers and different bits and bobs and so on, but anyway, it was really bad. I had a headache. I had confusion and brain fog and double vision because I thought I'll be okay. If I'm locked down, well, I can write. I'm working on several books and different things like this. I can write. It's not a big deal. I couldn't think straight. I just couldn't get my head straight. It was only for a few days, but it was really disconcerting because, like, what do? Double vision, you can't watch the telly. What do? You can't read a book. What do you do? But anyway, I got by. Still here, right. Nausea and vomiting, diarrhea. The nausea was at first, and that came with vomiting. I couldn't eat anything. I would just chuck it straight back up. Diarrhea, all right? I shan't labour this too much. I'll try and be nice about it. but I also have hemorrhoids. The diarrhea and the hemorrhoids together was a nightmare. Right now I'm sitting on a special cushion, which is memory foam, specially shaped and everything. It's brilliant. It's a godsend, I tell you. It cost me 35 quid, mind. But it's a godsend because I was in a mess. And I found some things that you could deal with it, and they got anesthetic in, and that helped a lot. And oh, it was horrid. That was the worst bit for me of all. My poor old bottom. Anyway, and I got depressed. It was probably just 2 days of depression. I don't know. I can't diagnose it. That's not the kind of therapist I was. But I would say it was clinical depression. Layman's diagnosis, right? 2 days. And once She Must Be Obeyed and I recognized that that's what it was, then we charted a path out of it. And what worked for me, just me, right, was because I was all the little things just seemed bigger than they were. I felt so ill. I felt like I was going to die. And I'll be honest with you, I wanted to. But I'm not the kind of person to do anything about that, right? So anyway, but then once I started to look at my perspective and look at the good things in life, there's still beer in the supermarket, for God's sake. I've still got my nice little puppies, got She Must Be Obeyed, all of that. I got a fridge full of food. It's not that bad. And once I started thinking like that, I came out of that depression. But it was horrid. It was 2 days and I was just as down as I can ever remember I was. Okay, and then I came out of it. I was getting cramps and stitch in the beginning. Now, in December 2019, I had abdominal surgery because I have a thing called diastasis recti, which is where the two sides of the rectus abdominis pull apart when you put tension on them. And then that seemed to lead to a what's called an umbilical hernia, which is a big thing that sticks out. So I went and had that repaired. They fitted a mesh to hold the sides together. I have to be a bit careful with it because it scares me. But I would get cramps. I would get pain in that. That would cause cramps that went up the side, went across my diaphragm, caused breathing problems. Didn't want that. What I did was I went to my friend Amazon and bought some really high-dosed electrolyte tablets. Not a recommendation. Do your own research. And that cured the problem. No cramps or stitches at all. Took care of it. It was brilliant. Very good. Very good indeed. So I'm not recommending it, but that's what I did. I also had problems with my veins. I started getting pains on the inside of my calf muscles because I was sitting down a lot. At that time, I couldn't sleep in the bed because of the cramps. So I had to sleep in a lazy boy, an easy chair kind of thing, fold out chair. And that was putting pressure on the back of my legs, which probably didn't help. I started off with ibuprofen, right? But somebody said to me that it inhibits the body's immune system to fight the coronavirus, although it takes and that's how it works. And it resists the inflammation. So if you're not going to get really sick with it, almost better to let the disease run its course. In my case only, right? Don't take any of this as advice. It's just my experience. But then I thought, well, I'll stop doing that. So I started taking acetaminophen, which I think is Panadol, paracetamol, that sort of thing. But then with these pains in my legs, I thought I'll take aspirin to thin my blood out a bit. Took aspirin. All that problem with the pain in my legs went away. I guess the circulation was fully restored. The problem there was I woke up one morning and I had a nosebleed from hell. And it bled for 24 hours, showed no sign of stopping until I stopped taking the aspirin. Didn't take anything then. Until the aspirin had worked its way out of my system and then it clotted and it was all fine. All right, so what a mess. It's all a mess. The other weird thing I got, and this is the reason perhaps you can see I got sorry, I'm looking at it in a mirror vision because of the screen. A bit more hair now is because I got hair loss. I was kind of combing after a shower. I would comb my hair and the comb would be full of hair. And I'm like, oh my God. We even had to change the system in the shower. And She Must Be Obeyed was the same. losing hair, changed the plug system in that because it was getting all fouled up and disgusting. Anyway, it hasn't worked as well for her, but for me, I started using a caffeine shampoo. You put it on when you start showering, rinse it off at the end. That seems to have done the trick for me, not really losing hair at all. But anyway, there we are, hair loss. So, what I got to say is a message of positivity. And as she who must be obeyed reminded me just before I started doing this video, remember, being positive supports your immune system. A positive focus, a happy focus, a keep calm and carry on if you like, but be happy. Don't just be calm and stoic. Be a bit more sort of cheerful and happy and all that sort of thing, because it's good for your immune system. And then that plus maybe vitamin D, check out Dr. John Campbell, might be what you need to resist coronavirus or help you get through coronavirus if you're unlucky enough to get it. Although I think most people are going to get it by hook or by crook. When you've got a disease that passes in the air, can be aerosolized, lasts 72 hours on stainless steel, I think we're all going to get it. But thankfully, most people only get a mild disease. Some lesser percentage, I don't know the numbers, about 5%, will be hospitalized, and then of course there are some deaths, but the death rate's gone right down, and they reckon that's because the people who are getting coronavirus now, building up that herd immunity, are in fact the younger people who get a much lighter experience of COVID. Maybe a sniffle, maybe a cold, maybe nothing at all. Same as little kids get, like the 0 to 5-year-olds. Unfortunately, the older kids transmit it just as much as anybody else, but they don't get it so bad. So it's a positive future. We're going to get through it. Hopefully some of these vaccines don't work. Already we're hearing, oh, well, the Oxford AstraZeneca one might not be quite as good as we want. It may not actually vaccinate you against the disease, but it will help you if you get it. So that's more of a medicine than a vaccine. It's changing all the time. The Russian one, if that one's the best one, are we going to ignore it just because it's the Russians and we've been told by the newspapers not to like the Russians and the politicians not to like the Russians? I'll take it. Well, I won't. But you get it. We've now got a track and tracing app. Maybe that'll do some good. Unfortunately, I think people have lost a lot of faith in the government and pretty much everything they do. So a track and tracing app that might track you and report to the government that data. I mean, the government's probably got it anyway, but do you really want to use it? I don't know. The jury's out on that one for me. Same as the vaccine, the jury's out. I'm not saying I won't take it, but at the moment my thought is no, I won't. But we'll see. We'll see. But it's positive. We're going forward. Unfortunately, the rates are going up like this. Hopefully that's those young people. Hopefully they won't get bad experiences from it. Our herd immunity will go up, which means when I go out in the street, I'm less likely to meet somebody who's actually infected with coronavirus, because more and more people have got it. More and more people have some kind of immunity to it. Well, we'll see, won't we? But anyway, that's my experience of coronavirus and a little bit about She Who Must Be Obeyed. I survived through it. It was horrid. It was nasty for me. But then I've got some kind of small comorbidities that probably made it a lot worse. She's not so bad with comorbidities, so she did a lot better through it, although she was hit very hard and went down hard, but she came back fairly quickly. So that's good news, positive news. Hopefully this might be some help for somebody. And if you do get something in this, check with your doctor before you do anything. But hopefully this has given some people some good ideas at least. All right, there we are. So this is the Incongruous channel. I'm Dr. Andy Yates. Be healthy and please take care.